Okay, lastly, we want to talk about endogeneity. So let's consider our last variable, sales duration. Sales duration is the difference between the announced day and the performance day. It's the number of days that the ticket is publicly sold. Okay, that's the amount of time that one guy may get a chance to buy the ticket. That is the time for advertisements to be effective. So ideally or intuitively, the longer sales duration, the more sales. Okay, so we expect at least in some region, we should have this kind of impact. And in that case, we may want to add sales duration as an independent variable, right? But in this particular example, in this particular story, it is problematic. Why? Typically, the theater determines its schedule for the next year at the end of each year. So right now, I have already decided what's going to be our shows and when will be them in the next year. And that means most performances are scheduled maybe 7 months or 8 months in before. Ticket selling would then start maybe in the next January or February for a show that is scheduled at October or November. So the ticket selling may start a few months before a series of shows are performed. However, if during the selling period we find out that a series seems to be really popular because the ticket is sold in a very fast pace. If that's the case, the theater may actually decide to add more shows into the series. So for example, if I have a series of shows of one simple topic in October and I start to sell at January, then probably in the March or in the April or in even June, we decide to add more shows because the tickets have been sold out. Okay? In that case, those additional shows would have much shorter sales duration, while typically they have high sales quantity, because that's the reason for us to add shows. Okay? Because their sales quantity tends to be high, so we add shows. And that means there are really a lot of shows whose sales duration is small, but sales quantity is high. Okay? And that's something we don't really want to capture because it is the sales quantity that drives those short sales duration. Because the sales quantity is high, so we add shows and those shows have small sales duration. Okay, this is some situation that the dependent variable affects an independent variable. In that case, we say we have endogeneity problem. In a regression model, if an independent variable is affected by the dependent variable, we say we have the endogeneity problem. So if we add sales duration into our model, we create the endogeneity problem, which is not good. On the other hand, year, time, capacity, and average price, they do not have the endogeneity problem because they are not affected by sales quantity, right? In this story. But if any of them may be modified when the theater sees a good or bad sales, endogeneity will emerge again. For example, in many cases, average price is adjustable. For example, for airline tickets, if we find the sales seems to be very good, and in a very short time we are running out of tickets, then probably we will increase our price, right? That's possible. For hotel, it's the same thing, but for performance or stage performances, sometimes tickets price are fixed. In that case, the price is a good independent variables. But if the price would be adjusted when the sales is good or bad, then we have endogeneity problem, and the average price may need to be used carefully. Okay, Endogeneity obviously results in biased prediction and eventually may guide us to do something that is not really useful or even maybe harmful. So for example, in our ticket selling example, if we really add sales duration into our model, then we're going to see a lot of shows whose sales duration is small and the quantity is high. That's possible, right? And then probably the coefficient is negative. The coefficient of sales duration is negative, which means if we have a shorter duration, we expect a higher profit. And then we may intentionally announce shows later so that we have a short sales duration. If we do not identify the endogeneity problem and then add sales duration into our model directly, probably we will make this very stupid, at least intuitively very stupid decision. In general, if you do data analysis, we expect that result can guide us to do something that is useful, maybe something that we don't expect in the past. But that should happen only if we are doing the right thing. Here, having endogeneity problem is a wrong thing because that gives us a biased prediction. Okay, biased prediction and eventually lead us to make a wrong decision, a bad decision. So that's something that we should avoid. As another example, consider the following story with promotional phone calls. Suppose there is a bank. The bank lets its workers to call people to invite them to deposit money in the bank. Okay, so these phone calls are very typical. And then there are many factors that may affect the outcome, which is success or not. So I make a phone call. Eventually, this guy, if he decides to make some money, put some money in our bank, then this is labeled as successful. So the call is gender, age, occupation, educational level, etc. may have some impact. The caller's gender, age, experience may have some impact. When is the call? Or in which day is the call? What's the weather at that call? Or even some combination of them may have some impact. Okay, so if I want to do a study, I probably record all this information from past calls. And I also record how many minutes or how many seconds is the duration of that call. Okay? It's possible, or actually in practice, it is found that the length of a call and success or failure has high correlation. You have already found this is qualitative. Okay, so that correlation is somewhat defined in another way. But anyway, this and that, they are highly correlated. But even in that case, we should not put the call duration as an independent variable because it is actually something that is affected by the outcome. When one agrees to put some money in a bank, then the caller would say more to arrange some more some further meetings or talk about some more details, and the call actually gets longer. Okay, so the key here is that the call duration is an independent variable which is affected by the dependent variable. If it's success, we tend to have long calls. Otherwise, the call would be typically short. So in this example, we may have endogeneity problem if we add call duration in our model. Okay, because this would guide us to say if the call is longer, then we have a higher probability to get successful. Okay, and if we see that eventually we will ask our workers to speak slowly, which is actually can be very bad. Okay, so in this example again, if we ignore the endogeneity problem and add one variable into our model, we will get a coefficient which may actually guide us to do something that we should not do. So that's the endogeneity problem. Okay, so how to avoid endogeneity? There are a few very complicated transformation things that we may do, but that's too complicated and not so useful in practice. So in practice, to avoid endogeneity, two things. Either we remove that dangerous independent variable, or we remove those records in which an independent variable is affected by the dependent one. So this is to remove a column, and this is to remove some rows. Okay? So in the ticket selling example, either we completely ignore sales duration, do not use it, or we remove those additional shows because they are biased. Okay, we can choose either way. In the promotional call example, probably all we can do is to remove the variable of call duration. Probably we can just choose not to use it because we cannot remove all the calls, right? Okay, so endogeneity is a problem and we need to keep an eye on it, and there are two ways to avoid it. That's something we must do when we want to construct a regression model. Okay, that's the end of today's lecture. Thank you.